They say his name was Jonah, a man who never raised his voice, never broke a rule, until the day they sold his wife, Ruth, like cattle under a blazing Louisiana sun. He watched her cry out his name as white men shouted prices, their laughter drowning her screams. That's when something in him cracked, not from madness, but from clarity. They thought he was broken. They thought he'd vanish like the rest. But by nightfall, the men who bid on her started dying. One strangled, one drowned, one hanging from his own church steeple. And the stranger who helped him? He wasn't what he seemed either, because, in a world built on chains, Jonah found a new kind of freedom, the kind that burns everything it touches. They sold his love for silver, and he made sure every man who paid the price learned what it truly cost. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The Louisiana sun beat down like a hammer on hot metal, turning the parish square into a furnace of misery. Jonah felt sweat running down his back as he stood beside Ruth, their fingers touching for what might be the last time. The touch was all they had. No words could fix what was happening. Silas Granger, the slave trader, strutted around Ruth like a rooster in a henhouse. His voice carried across the crowd, slick with practiced charm. "Feast your eyes, gentlemen." A rare beauty with skills both domestic and refined. His hand gestured at Ruth as if showing off fine china. Reads well enough to manage household accounts, sews like she was born with needle and thread, and, he lowered his voice to a theatrical whisper, guaranteed to breed strong children. Ruth kept her eyes down, her face blank. But Jonah saw the slight tremor in her hands, the only sign of the terror inside her. They'd been together 7 years, married in secret beneath the old magnolia tree on the plantation. Master Caleb Ward had allowed it, not from kindness, but because it kept Jonah working harder. Now Ward stood off to the side, arms crossed, checking his pocket watch as if this were merely a business delay. Jonah had begged him that morning, falling to his knees in the dirt. "Please, Master Ward, I'll work double shifts. Take food from my rations. Anything." Ward had looked at him the way a man might look at a broken plow. "Times are hard, Jonah. Can't keep unneeded house servants when fields need tending. Nothing personal, just business. Nothing personal." As if tearing apart his life was just a line in an account book. The bidding started with Overseer Crenshaw from the neighboring plantation. He raised his thick hand. $20 for the woman. Dr. Edwin Carter, the parish physician known for his scientific interest in slave bodies, smiled thinly. $30. I could use someone with a steady hand in my surgery. Jonah's chest tightened. He knew what happened to slaves in Carter's surgery. They came out different, if they came out at all. Reverend Josiah Pike raised his Bible as if it were a bidding paddle. $40. The Lord calls me to save this poor soul, the crowd murmured. The Reverend's saved slave women often ended up pregnant with mysteriously light-skinned children. Then a perfumed voice cut through the crowd. $100. Heads turned to Charles Renard, the New Orleans merchant. His fine coat and gold-tipped cane marked him as different from the local plantation men. His eyes crawled over Ruth like fingers. $100, he repeated, for quality merchandise. Silas Granger could barely contain his excitement. $100 from Mr. Renard. Do I hear any other bids? Jonah memorized every face. Crenshaw with his red, bulging neck. Dr. Carter with his cold, assessing eyes. Reverend Pike with his false smile. And Renard, smooth, certain, a predator in fine clothes. Going once, Granger called. Jonah lunged forward. No! His hand caught Granger by the throat. For one bright, clear moment, he felt the man's pulse flutter under his fingers. Then pain exploded across the back of his head. He hit the wooden platform hard, tasting blood. "Restrain that animal!" someone shouted. Rough hands grabbed him. Chains bit into his wrists. Through blurry eyes, he saw Ruth reaching for him, screaming his name. Her voice cut through everything else. "Jonah! Jonah!" The gavel fell with a sound like a coffin lid closing. "Sold to Mr. Charles Renard for $100. Renard tossed a leather pouch to Granger, who caught it with practiced ease. Two men dragged Ruth toward a waiting wagon. She fought them, her feet sliding in the dirt, her voice breaking as she called for Jonah. "I'll find you!" Jonah shouted, blood streaming from his split lip. "I swear I'll find you!" A boot slammed into his ribs, stealing his breath. Ward stood over him, face twisted with anger. "That display cost me $50 off your price," he spat. "You'll pay for that in the fields." Through the crowd and chaos, Jonah glimpsed movement. A man with light brown skin, dressed better than any black man had right to be in Louisiana, moved carefully through the edge of the square. Their eyes met for just a moment. Then the stranger was beside him, seemingly adjusting his shoe, his hand slipping something into Jonah's bound fingers. "Stay alive," the man whispered, so low only Jonah could hear. Then he vanished into the crowd like mist. Guards dragged Jonah to a holding pen behind the auction platform. They threw him onto the dirt floor, his body singing with pain. Blood leaked from his nose and mouth. His ribs screamed when he breathed. But his fingers still clutched the stranger's gift, a folded scrap of paper. Hours later, when night fell and the guards dozed by their lanterns, Jonah carefully unfolded the note. The paper was fine, the handwriting educated. By flickering light, he read the message that would change everything. "I can help you find her, if you can stomach what it costs." Night fell like a shroud over the holding pens. The guards slumped against a nearby tree, a half-empty bottle of whiskey between them. Jonah lay still, every breath sending pain through his ribs. His wrists were raw from the chains, but the overseer had removed them once Jonah was locked in the pen. "No sense wasting good iron on damaged goods," he'd muttered. The note crinkled in Jonah's palm. He'd read it a dozen times, trying to make sense of the stranger's offer. Help finding Ruth. But at what cost? A soft noise came from the darkness beyond the wooden fence. The scrape of a boot on dirt. Jonah tensed, ready for another beating. "You still breathing in there?" A voice, barely above a whisper. Jonah crawled to the edge of the pen. Through a gap in the slats, he saw the same light-skinned man from the auction. Up close, Jonah could see he was older, maybe 40, with careful eyes that missed nothing. "Who are you?" Jonah whispered. "Isaiah Bell." The man glanced toward the sleeping guards. "We don't have much time. They'll be moving you to Ward's plantation at first light." "What do you want?" Isaiah's face was half hidden in shadow. "To get you out of here. Tonight." Jonah gripped the slats. "Why would you help me?" "Because I know where they're taking your wife." Isaiah leaned closer. "And because every man who escapes is one less tool in their fields." Hope flared in Jonah's chest, painful as a knife wound. "How do I know I can trust you?" Isaiah smiled without humor. "You don't. But staying here means you'll never see Ruth again. I'm offering a chance, slim as it might be." Jonah studied the man's face. Isaiah Bell dressed like a free merchant, talked like he'd had schooling. Yet here he was, risking everything to help a slave he didn't know. "What's the cost?" Jonah asked, remembering the note. Isaiah's eyes hardened. "Information. Names. Places. Everything you know about Ward's operation. Who he sells to. Which traders he works with. You're... what? Fighting the slave trade?" "In my own way." Isaiah checked the guards again. "I trade in many things, Jonah. Information is just the most valuable." A dog barked in the distance. The guards stirred but didn't wake. "They'll track us with hounds," Jonah said. Isaiah pulled something from his pocket, a small glass vial. "Not if they can't smell us. I came prepared. He pointed to the back of the pen. That section of fence is rotted through. I checked it earlier. You can break it if you kick hard enough. Jonah hesitated only a moment. The image of Ruth being dragged away burned in his mind. I'll be ready in 5 minutes. Isaiah nodded and melted back into the shadows. Jonah moved quietly to the rear of the pen. The wooden slats were indeed rotten, softened by years of rain and humidity. He braced himself against the opposite wall and kicked at the weakest spot. Pain lanced through his bruised body, but he bit back a groan. Another kick. Then another. On the 4th try, the wood splintered. One more hard kick, and a section broke free, leaving a gap just wide enough for a man to squeeze through. Jonah looked back at the guards, still asleep, their chins on their chests. He slipped through the opening, feeling splinters tear at his shirt. Isaiah appeared beside him like a ghost. Here. He handed Jonah the vial. Rub this on your clothes and skin. It's a mixture of turpentine and pepper. Confuses the hounds. The liquid burned Jonah's nostrils as he smeared it over his arms and legs. Isaiah did the same, then pointed toward a line of cypress trees that marked the edge of the swamp. Stay low. Follow me. They moved through the darkness, crouching behind slave cabins and storage sheds. The plantation was quiet except for the occasional cry of a nightbird. When they reached the tree line, Isaiah paused. The swamp is our friend tonight, he whispered. White men fear it. We don't have to. Jonah had worked these lands his whole life. He knew which paths were safe, which waters to avoid. Head for the river, he said. I know a place where we can cross. They pushed deeper into the cypress forest. The ground grew soft beneath their feet, then soggy. Soon they were wading through shallow water, moving carefully to avoid making splashes. The sounds of the swamp enveloped them, frogs, insects, the occasional splash of something larger moving through deeper water. Behind them, the alarm finally sounded. A bell rang from the plantation house, followed by shouts and the baying of hounds. They won't follow far into the swamp at night, Isaiah said. But we need to keep moving. For hours they traveled, sometimes walking, sometimes swimming through channels choked with water hyacinths. The pepper mixture kept the hounds confused, but Jonah could still hear them howling in the distance. His body ached from the beating and the escape, but fear kept him moving forward. Near dawn, they reached the river. Exhausted, they collapsed on a small rise of dry ground sheltered by a massive willow tree. The dogs had gone silent. For now, they were safe. Isaiah pulled dried meat and cornbread from a pouch at his waist. Eat. You'll need your strength. Jonah took the food, suddenly aware of his hunger. Where are we going? New Orleans. Isaiah stared across the dark water. That's where Renard took her. He owns an import house on the waterfront, but he has other properties. His voice hardened. He's known for collecting beautiful things. Jonah's hands tightened into fists. If he touches her, one step at a time, Isaiah warned. First, we need to get there alive. Then we find out exactly where she is. And then? Isaiah studied him. That depends on what you're willing to do. The first light of dawn touched the eastern sky, turning the river from black to silver. In the growing light, Jonah could see the cuts and bruises on his arms from their journey through the swamp. Small prices to pay. The frogs sang in the darkness around them, a chorus that seemed to pulse with Jonah's own heartbeat. He pulled the note from his pocket, now damp and smudged, but still legible, the promise of help, and the unnamed cost. If she breathes, I'll find her, Jonah said, his voice low and steady. If she's dead, I'll bury them all. Isaiah watched him without speaking, his eyes calculating what kind of weapon Jonah might become. The river flowed on, carrying fallen leaves toward New Orleans and toward Ruth. The sky turned from black to purple to gold as dawn broke over the cypress swamps. Isaiah shook Jonah awake from a restless sleep. Time to move, he said, handing Jonah a bundle of clothes. Put these on. The clothes were plain but clean, a white cotton shirt, dark trousers, and a worn vest. Better quality than anything Jonah had worn before. "You'll be my servant today," Isaiah explained. "Keep your eyes down, speak only when spoken to. People see what they expect to see." They walked for an hour, following the river's edge until they reached a dirt road. Isaiah whistled a pattern, and minutes later a wagon appeared around the bend. The driver, an old man with skin like leather, nodded silently. "My cousin," Isaiah said. "He makes deliveries to the fine houses in New Orleans 3 times a week." The wagon was half filled with produce: bright red tomatoes, green beans, and yellow squash. Isaiah and Jonah climbed into the back, burrowing beneath empty burlap sacks. The smell of earth and vegetables surrounded them. "The city guards check wagons at the main roads," Isaiah whispered, as the wagon began to move. "But they rarely look carefully at food deliveries. Everyone needs to eat." The journey took hours. Jonah's body ached from yesterday's beating, but his mind stayed fixed on Ruth. Was she hurt? Scared? Did she think he had abandoned her? "This Renard," Jonah whispered. "What kind of man is he?" Isaiah's face darkened. "Wealthy, powerful, thinks everything has a price." He hesitated. "He collects beautiful things, art, furniture, and people." "People aren't things," Jonah said through clenched teeth. "To men like Renard, they are." The wagon slowed as they entered the outskirts of New Orleans. They heard voices, guards checking papers, asking questions. Jonah held his breath. Then the wagon moved forward again. The sounds of the city grew louder: carts rattling over cobblestones, vendors calling their wares, the distant clanging of ships' bells from the harbor. The wagon made several stops, delivering vegetables to kitchens of fine houses. At each stop, Jonah and Isaiah remained hidden. Finally, the driver tapped twice on the side of the wagon. Their signal. "This is it," Isaiah whispered. "Renard's estate." They slipped from beneath the sacks. The driver handed them each a crate of tomatoes. "Servant's entrance is round back. When you're finished, find your own way out." Isaiah nodded thanks. Jonah lifted the crate and followed him through a wrought-iron gate into a garden filled with flowering bushes and statues. The house beyond was massive: white columns, tall windows, a wide veranda wrapped around the front. Jonah's heart stopped. There, sitting on the veranda, was Ruth. She wore a blue silk dress that caught the morning light. Her hair was arranged in an elegant style he'd never seen before. She looked like a different woman, except for her eyes. Those were still Ruth's. She wasn't chained, wasn't guarded. She simply sat in a chair, reading a book, as if this were her home. "Keep moving," Isaiah hissed. "Don't stare." They delivered the vegetables to the kitchen, where a cook barely glanced at them before waving them away. As they left through the servant's door, Isaiah whispered, "Tonight, after dark, I'll create a distraction at the front of the house while you find her." The hours crawled by like years. They hid in an abandoned shed near the docks, waiting for night to fall. Jonah paced like a caged animal. "Something's wrong," he said. She looked comfortable. "Appearances can be deceiving," Isaiah replied, "especially in houses like Renard's." When darkness finally came, they returned to the mansion. Lights glowed in most windows. Music drifted from inside, a piano playing something slow and sad. "Renard is hosting guests tonight," Isaiah said. "Perfect timing. I'll start a small fire in the stables. Not enough to hurt anyone, just enough to draw attention. You have 10 minutes to find Ruth and get out." Isaiah disappeared into the shadows. Jonah counted to 100, then slipped through the garden to the servants' entrance they'd used earlier. The door was unlocked. Inside, the hallway was empty, all the servants busy with the party. He moved silently, listening for Ruth's voice. He remembered the veranda where he'd seen her that morning. There must be a room connected to it. He found it, a small sitting room with windows facing the garden. And there, alone, standing by the window, was Ruth. She still wore the blue silk dress. In the lamplight, he could see her clearly. No bruises, no signs of mistreatment. But when she turned and saw him, her face went pale with fear. "Jonah," she whispered, stepping back. "You can't be here. You have to go." He moved toward her, arms outstretched. "I came for you. We're leaving. Now." She shook her head, trembling. "No, you don't understand. Whatever he's done to you, he hasn't hurt me," she said, her voice breaking. "That was our agreement." Jonah froze. "What agreement?" Ruth's eyes filled with tears. "When Master Ward decided to sell us, Renard wanted only me, but Ward was going to sell you to the sugar plantation on the Delta." Her voice dropped. "No one survives there more than 2 years." Understanding dawned slowly, horrible as sunrise over a battlefield. "I made a deal with Renard," she continued. "I would accept my place here willingly, without fighting or trying to run. In exchange, he would buy your contract from Ward and sell it to Isaiah Bell." "Isaiah?" Jonah felt the world tilting beneath his feet. "He bought me." "To free you," Ruth said. "That was the arrangement. Isaiah helps people escape. Renard knows this but looks the other way. As long as I stay." Shouts erupted from the front of the house. The distraction had begun. "You have to leave," Ruth pleaded. "If Renard finds you here, the deal is broken. He'll have you hunted down and killed." "I won't leave without you." She placed her hands on his chest. "I chose this so you could live. Don't make my sacrifice meaningless." Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Ruth pushed him toward a servant's door. "Go, please. I am safe for now." "Ruth, I love you," she whispered. "Now run." Jonah stumbled through the servant halls, his mind reeling. Ruth had sold herself. For him. Isaiah had bought him. To free him. Nothing made sense anymore. He slipped out a back door and across the garden. The night air felt too thick to breathe. His chest burned with every step. A magnolia tree stood near the garden wall, its white flowers glowing in the darkness. Jonah collapsed beneath it, pressing his forehead against its rough bark. Ruth's words echoed in his head. "I chose this, so you could live." His grief curdled into something darker, something with teeth and claws. It wasn't just sadness anymore. It was wrath against the world that had forced such a choice upon her. Upon them both. The night passed like a funeral procession, slow, dark, and filled with grief. The magnolia tree stood silent witness as Jonah sat beneath its spreading branches, his back against the rough bark, eyes fixed on white blossoms that seemed to glow in the darkness. Dawn came in gentle layers, first gray, then pink, then gold. The birds began their morning songs. Dew collected on the grass and on Jonah's shoulders, but he didn't move. Isaiah found him there, just as the sun broke over the cypress trees. He approached cautiously, carrying a small sack of food and a canteen of water. "You need to eat," he said, crouching beside Jonah. Jonah didn't look at him. "You bought me." Isaiah nodded slowly. "I did. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have trusted me if I had?" Isaiah handed him the canteen. "Most men don't take kindly to learning they've been sold, even if it's to freedom." Jonah drank deeply, then wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. His eyes were red-rimmed but dry, as if all his tears had burned away in the night. "Ruth made the deal," Isaiah explained. "She came to me first, asked if I could help. She knew what I did, helping people escape." He paused. "She loves you more than herself. And now she's trapped," Jonah said, his voice like gravel, "living as that man's property." "We'll find a way to free her," Isaiah said. "Give me time to—" "No." Jonah stood up suddenly. He pulled a knife from his belt, a small blade he'd taken from Renard's kitchen the night before. "I'm done waiting for freedom to be given. From now on, I take it." Before Isaiah could stop him, Jonah turned to the magnolia tree and began carving into its white bark. The knife bit deep, peeling away layers to reveal the darker wood beneath. When he finished, a single letter stood out against the pale trunk. R. Ruth, Isaiah whispered. Ruth, Jonah confirmed. Then he raised his eyes to the brightening sky. God is my witness. Every man who bid on my wife will die by my hands. Every one of them will speak her name before they meet their Maker. Isaiah stood very still, watching this transformation. The quiet, careful man he'd helped escape was gone. In his place stood someone harder, someone dangerous. Starting with who? Isaiah asked finally. Overseer Crenshaw. He placed the first bid. Jonah's hands clenched into fists. I can still hear his voice. $20 for just her hands. They look soft. Isaiah rubbed his jaw, thinking. What stood before him was no longer just a man seeking freedom. This was vengeance, taking human form. He could walk away now, wash his hands of this blood oath. But something in Jonah's eyes, the absolute certainty, the righteous fury, held him in place. If you do this, Isaiah said carefully, there's no turning back. You understand that? There was no turning back the moment they put Ruth on that auction block. Isaiah nodded once. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I thought you might say that. Here. Jonah took the paper and opened it. Inside was a hand-drawn map of the parish, with 4 locations marked and named. How did you— I keep records, Isaiah said. Trade ledgers, sale notices, plantation accounts. Information is power in this world. These are the men who bid on Ruth. Jonah studied the map, tracing each mark with his finger. Crenshaw, Dr. Carter, Reverend Pike, and Renard. Crenshaw will be the easiest to reach, Isaiah said. He drinks at the Red Dog Tavern most nights, passes out in a shed behind it when he's too drunk to ride home. Tonight? Tonight? Isaiah's face was grim. But Jonah, if we do this, if I help you, you follow my lead. No unnecessary risks. No leaving witnesses. We strike quick and clean, then disappear. Jonah folded the map and tucked it inside his shirt, close to his heart. I'll do whatever it takes. They spent the day preparing. Isaiah took Jonah to a hideout in the swamps, a small cabin raised on stilts above the black water. Inside were supplies, food, weapons, clean clothes. I help people run, Isaiah explained, as he showed Jonah a small collection of knives. Sometimes running means fighting. Jonah selected a knife with a bone handle and a curved blade. The weight felt good in his palm, like it belonged there. As dusk approached, they changed into dark clothes and blackened their faces with charcoal. Isaiah led Jonah to a small skiff hidden among the reeds. Together they pushed it into the water and climbed aboard. The tavern's upriver, Isaiah whispered, handing Jonah a paddle. We'll approach from the water's side. Less chance of being seen. They moved silently through the gathering darkness, the only sound the soft dip and pull of their paddles in the water. Fireflies sparked around them. A bullfrog called from somewhere in the reeds. Jonah's mind filled with Ruth, her smile when they first met, her hands so gentle on his face, her voice when she sang in the fields. Then he remembered her standing in that fine blue dress, saying, I chose this so you could live. He touched the knife at his belt, feeling its solid presence. The blood oath had been made. There was no turning back now. The skiff glided northward, guided by Isaiah's sure hand. The last light faded from the sky, leaving only stars and a thin slice of moon to light their way. Jonah's fingers traced the blood-stained knife at his belt. He closed his eyes and whispered the names like a prayer. Crenshaw, Carter, Pike, Renard. Each name a promise. Each name a death. 3 days later, a hot wind swept through the cane fields of the hawthorn plantation. The stalks whispered and rustled, a constant hum that matched the buzzing insects floating in the thick afternoon air. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the dusty road where two black men walked with burlap sacks slung over their shoulders. "Remember," Isaiah whispered as they approached the plantation gates, "you're Joseph today. You don't speak unless spoken to. Let me do the talking." Jonah nodded, keeping his eyes down as a white overseer approached them. His heart hammered against his ribs, but his face stayed blank. "What's your business?" the man called out, hand resting on the pistol at his hip. Isaiah pulled a crumpled paper from his pocket. "Delivery for Overseer Crenshaw," he said, his voice changing to a more submissive tone. "New leather goods from Carson's shop in town. Got his order right here." The overseer barely glanced at the forged document before waving them through. "Supply sheds behind the main house. Don't dawdle." They walked unhurried down the path, past fields where enslaved men and women bent low over the cane, cutting stalks with short, curved knives. Sweat soaked their clothes despite the setting sun. An overseer watched from horseback, whip coiled at his side. Jonah's jaw tightened. He had worked fields just like this one until Isaiah helped him escape. The familiar ache in his shoulders returned at the sight. "Easy," Isaiah murmured. "We're almost there." The supply shed stood in the shadow of the main house, a grand white building with tall columns and wide porches. Beyond it lay a smaller house where Crenshaw lived, separate from the main family, but better than the slave quarters visible in the distance. "We'll wait here," Isaiah said as they entered the shed. "Crenshaw checks supplies at sundown before he heads to the tavern." The shed smelled of leather, tobacco, and the sharp tang of iron tools. They positioned themselves behind stacked barrels, their burlap sacks open to reveal not goods, but rope and a small knife. "When he comes," Isaiah began. "I know what to do," Jonah cut him off. His voice was steady, but his eyes burned with an intensity that made even Isaiah look away. They waited as the light outside shifted from gold to purple. A bell rang, signaling the end of field work. Voices drifted through the walls, orders being called, tools being stored. Then footsteps approached the shed, heavy boots on packed dirt. The door creaked open, and Overseer Crenshaw stepped inside. He was a thick-bodied man with a red face and meaty hands. A leather belt cinched his considerable waist, the buckle gleaming dully in the fading light. "Delivery?" he called, looking around. "Who brought a delivery this late?" Jonah moved so quickly that Isaiah barely saw him slip from their hiding place. One moment Crenshaw stood framed in the doorway. The next, Jonah's arm was around his throat, dragging him backward into the shadows. His hand clamped over Crenshaw's mouth before the man could shout. "Remember me?" Jonah whispered into the overseer's ear. Crenshaw's eyes bulged. He struggled, but Jonah held him firm, his arm locked across the man's windpipe. "You don't," Jonah continued, his voice terrifyingly calm. "But I remember you. 3 days ago. The auction block in the parish square." Understanding dawned in Crenshaw's eyes. Fear replaced confusion. "My wife," Jonah said. "You bid on her first. $20 for her hands, you said." Isaiah closed the shed door, casting them into near darkness. He watched, motionless, as Jonah tightened his grip. "I want you to say her name," Jonah demanded, easing his hand from Crenshaw's mouth just enough to let him speak. I can't," Crenshaw gasped. "Ruth," Jonah said. "Her name is Ruth." "Please," Crenshaw begged, his voice a rasp. "I got money." Jonah's expression didn't change. "Say her name." "Ruth," Crenshaw finally choked out. "Her name's Ruth." "Good." Jonah nodded once. Then he reached down and unbuckled Crenshaw's belt with one quick movement. The leather slid free with a soft hiss. Before Crenshaw could cry out, Jonah looped the belt around his neck and pulled tight. The overseer kicked and thrashed, his boots drumming against the dirt floor. His hands clawed at the leather, crushing his throat. But Jonah held firm, his face set like stone, watching as the life drained from Crenshaw's bulging eyes. It took less than 2 minutes. The overseer's struggles weakened, then stopped altogether. His body went limp in Jonah's arms. "Help me with him," Jonah said, his voice flat. Isaiah hesitated only a moment before moving forward. Together, they wrapped Crenshaw's body in an empty grain sack and carried it out at the back door of the shed. Night had fallen completely now, cloaking their movements as they made their way to a drainage ditch that ran along the edge of the property. "Here," Isaiah whispered. They lowered the body into the muddy water, pushing it beneath the surface. "The rain tomorrow will carry him downstream. They'll think he fell in drunk." Jonah nodded, his face invisible in the darkness. They worked quickly to cover their tracks, then slipped away from the plantation as silently as they had come. No alarm was raised. No one had seen them enter. No one saw them leave. By midnight, they had reached the river where their skiff was hidden. The black water flowed silently, reflecting fragments of stars and moonlight. Jonah knelt at the river's edge and plunged his hands into the cold water. The current washed away the blood, Crenshaw's blood, that had dried beneath his fingernails and in the creases of his palms. He stared at his reflection in the rippling surface. The face that looked back was his own, yet somehow different, harder, colder. The eyes that had once looked upon Ruth with tenderness now held only shadow. Behind him, Isaiah stood watching, a strange mixture of emotions crossing his face. He had seen men kill before, in self-defense, in desperation, in rage. But this had been something else entirely. Methodical, patient, a vow fulfilled with terrible precision. "One down," Jonah said without turning. "3 to go." Isaiah didn't answer. He wasn't sure if he should fear this man he'd helped create or follow him to the bitter end. The oath under the magnolia tree had set something in motion that might consume them both. Jonah rose from the riverside, water dripping from his hands. He turned to face Isaiah, his expression unreadable in the moonlight. "Dr. Edwin Carter," he said. "He's next." 6 weeks passed. The Louisiana summer deepened, wrapping the bayou in a blanket of thick, wet heat. The cane stalks grew taller, their green tops swaying in whatever breeze managed to stir the heavy air. In the fields, men and women worked from sunrise to sunset, cutting the early harvest, while sweat soaked their clothes and mosquitoes buzzed around their faces. Jonah and Isaiah traveled carefully, moving only at night, hiding during the day. They avoided towns and roads, following instead the winding waterways that connected plantation to plantation like veins in a body. "We're close now," Isaiah said, as they tied their skiff to a cypress root. "Carter's place is just beyond that ridge." Jonah nodded, his face revealing nothing. In the weeks since Crenshaw's death, he had grown quieter, more focused. The raw anger that had driven him to make his vow had hardened into something colder, more patient. "The doctor runs the infirmary for 3 plantations," Isaiah explained, unfolding a crude map drawn on yellowed paper. "He lives in the back room. Treats both white folks and slaves, though not the same way, of course." "What do you mean?" Jonah asked. Isaiah's face darkened. "Rumor is he uses slaves for experiments. Says he's studying disease, but really he's just satisfying his curiosity." Jonah felt something twist inside his chest. "And Ruth? Her name was in his ledger?" "Yes. He bid on her hands, said they were perfect specimens." Isaiah hesitated. "But remember, she ended up with Renard." They waited until midnight before approaching the plantation. Unlike the large manor houses they had passed, Dr. Carter's home was modest, a whitewashed building attached to a longer structure that served as the infirmary. A single lamp burned in the window, casting a yellow glow across the grass. They moved silently toward the back, where a small irrigation system fed water from a nearby stream into tanks behind the building. The water supply for the doctor's work. "I'll watch the path," Isaiah whispered. "You find the ledger." Jonah slipped inside through an unlocked door. The infirmary was dark except for the faint light from a lantern in the adjacent room. The doctor's quarters. Shelves lined the walls, filled with glass jars and bottles. A long table stood in the center, its surface stained dark. Moving carefully between the tables and cabinets, Jonah found a desk in the corner. He eased open the drawer and lifted out a thick book bound in leather, the doctor's patient ledger. He opened it, scanning the pages by the dim light filtering from the next room. Names filled the columns, first names only, followed by descriptions. Male, strong back, fever-resistant. Female, childbearing age, recovered from pox. Each entry marked a person reduced to parts, to symptoms, to curiosities. Then he saw it. Ruth's name, written in the doctor's neat script. Beside it, female, exceptional hands, potential resistance to consumption. But a line had been drawn through the entry. Next to it, a note. Specimen transferred north after initial examination. Payment received. Jonah's fingers tightened on the page. Transferred north, not to Renard at all. A floorboard creaked behind him. Jonah turned to find himself face to face with Dr. Edwin Carter. The man was tall and thin, with spectacles perched on his long nose. He wore a dressing gown over his night clothes, and his gray hair stood up in tufts. "Who are you?" Carter demanded, raising the lantern higher. "How did you get in here?" Jonah said nothing. He closed the ledger slowly and placed it back on the desk. Recognition dawned in Carter's eyes. "I know you," he said. "You're the one who attacked Silas at the auction. The husband of that woman with the exceptional hands. Her name is Ruth," Jonah said quietly. Carter took a step backward. "Now, listen here. I'm a man of science. I didn't mean any harm to your wife. I simply recognized her unique anatomical—" "Where is she?" Jonah interrupted, advancing slowly. "I don't know," Carter said, his voice rising. "I only examined her once. Then she was sold again. North, I think. To a medical college in Baltimore. For study." "Study," Jonah repeated. The word hung in the air between them. Carter kept talking, words spilling out faster as Jonah approached. "I'm a physician. I help your people. I cure diseases. My research is important." Jonah grabbed the doctor by his dressing gown and dragged him toward the back door. Carter struggled, but Jonah's grip was iron. "Please," the doctor begged as Jonah pushed him outside. "I have money. I can help you find her." Isaiah stood waiting, his eyes widening at the sight of the captured doctor. "Jonah, what are you doing?" "We agreed." "He sold her," Jonah said. "To be studied." "Like an animal!" He forced Carter toward the irrigation tanks. The doctor struggled harder when he realized where they were heading. "No! You don't understand. My work saves lives." Jonah pushed him into the shallow water of the irrigation trench. Carter fell with a splash, his spectacles flying from his face. "Ruth knew her Bible," Jonah said, holding the doctor's head just above the water. "She would read it to me in secret." "Do you know what it says about the flood, doctor?" Carter gasped, trying to find his footing in the muddy trench. "Please." "It says the waters rose and covered the earth," Jonah continued, his voice steady. "And every living thing that moved upon the earth died." He pushed the doctor's head under the water. Carter thrashed, bubbles streaming from his mouth. "Jonah, stop!" Isaiah grabbed his shoulder. "This isn't right. Revenge will damn us both." Jonah pulled Carter up long enough for him to gasp a single breath. "It already has," he replied, looking at Isaiah with empty eyes. Then he pushed the doctor down again, holding him there as the thrashing slowly weakened. When it was over, Jonah released his grip. The doctor's body floated face down in the trench. "We need to go," Isaiah said urgently. Someone might have heard. Working quickly, they opened the irrigation gates wider. Water rushed in, filling the trench and spilling over its banks. By morning, it would look like an accident. The doctor checking the water supply. A slip, a fall. They slipped away as the first hints of dawn lightened the eastern sky. Behind them, water seeped from the overflowing trench, carrying Dr. Carter's spectacles along the current and into the main canal. The morning air was fresh and clean, but Jonah could still smell death on his clothes. It clung to him like a second skin, a smell he was beginning to know too well. Yet he felt nothing. No satisfaction, no relief, no horror at what he had done. Only a cold certainty that his path was set, and he would follow it to the end. 2 down, 2 to go. The summer heat gave way to autumn's gentle touch. Golden light filtered through trees that had begun to shed their leaves, and the air carried the first hints of coolness after months of sweltering humidity. The harvest was nearly done, the cane fields buzzing with the final weeks of cutting and grinding before winter came. Jonah and Isaiah boarded a riverboat heading north along the Tesh, blending in among the laborers and travelers. Jonah kept his head down, his cap pulled low over his eyes. In the weeks since Dr. Carter's death, whispers had spread through the parishes, rumors of a vengeful spirit stalking plantation masters. No one connected these deaths to the quiet man sitting at the rear of the boat, watching the shoreline slip past. "St. Martinville is the next stop," Isaiah said quietly, settling beside Jonah. "Reverend Pike preaches at the white church there." Jonah nodded, saying nothing. The space between them had grown since Carter's drowning. Isaiah still helped, still guided, but his eyes held a new wariness when they looked upon his companion. "He doesn't live at the church," Isaiah continued. "He has a house near the square, but he spends most evenings alone in prayer at the sanctuary." "How do you know all this?" Jonah finally asked. Isaiah's mouth tightened. "I have my ways. People talk to me. They trust me." "But not me," Jonah said. It wasn't a question. "You're changing," Isaiah replied, "and not for the better." The riverboat docked before sunset. St. Martinville spread before them, a small town with French-style buildings clustered around a central square. The church stood at the far end, its white steeple rising above the surrounding rooftops like a bony finger pointing to heaven. They found lodging in the colored section at the edge of town, a small room behind a cooper's shop. The next morning, Jonah dressed in rough clothes and made his way to the stables next to the church. The stablemaster hired him without question. Another pair of hands was always needed, especially as harvest celebrations approached. From the stableyard, Jonah could hear Reverend Pike's booming voice as he practiced his Sunday sermon. The words drifted through the open church windows. As St. Paul teaches us, servants must obey their earthly masters with fear and trembling. This is God's design, the holy chain that binds society together in divine order. Jonah shoveled manure and brushed down horses, all while committing Pike's movements to memory. The Reverend was a creature of habit, rising early, preaching, taking lunch at home, then returning to the empty church to prepare his next sermon until after dark. Sunday came. Jonah stood at the back of the church, hat in hand, among the few black faces allowed to attend white services. From this position, he could see Pike clearly, a tall man with thinning gray hair and a beard that reached halfway down his chest. His voice filled the sanctuary as he preached about order and obedience. "God has created a world of stations," Pike thundered, his fist pounding the pulpit. "The lowest must serve the highest, just as angels serve the Lord. To break this chain is to invite chaos, to defy God himself." The white congregation nodded and murmured their agreement. Jonah watched their faces, memorizing each one that smiled or nodded at Pike's words. That night, when the town had quieted and most windows had gone dark, Jonah slipped away from their room. Isaiah grabbed his arm before he could leave. "Don't do this," he whispered. "We can still turn back." Jonah looked at him. "No," he said simply. "We can't." The church was silent when Jonah entered through the unlocked side door. A single lamp burned in the sanctuary, where Reverend Pike sat alone at a desk near the altar, writing in a leather-bound book. Pike looked up at the sound of Jonah's footsteps on the wooden floor. "Who's there?" "The church is closed." "I've come to talk about Ruth," Jonah said. stepping into the pool of lamplight. Pike squinted. Then recognition dawned. The stable hand. What do you want? You bid on my wife at the auction block. The Reverend's face hardened. I bid for her soul, boy, to save her from worse fates. Worse than being sold like cattle? Jonah asked quietly. Worse than being torn from her husband? Pike stood, drawing himself up to his full height. I am a man of God. I treat my servants with Christian kindness. Many would count themselves blessed to be under my care. Did you think of Ruth's blessings when you raised your hand to buy her? The Reverend's eyes narrowed. You forget your place, boy. I could have you whipped for such insolence. My place, Jonah repeated. He moved closer, until only the desk separated them. My place was beside my wife. Until men like you decided otherwise. Pike reached for the bell on his desk, to summon help, perhaps, but Jonah was faster. His hand closed around the Reverend's wrist with surprising strength. What is this? Pike demanded, his voice rising. Unhand me at once. I want you to understand something, Reverend, Jonah said calmly. Every man who bid on Ruth that day made a promise to me without knowing it. A promise I'm here to collect. Fear flickered across Pike's face as understanding dawned. He tried to pull away, but Jonah's grip was iron. The bell in your tower, Jonah said. Does it still ring? Before Pike could answer, Jonah had dragged him toward the narrow staircase leading to the bell tower. The Reverend fought, kicking and shouting, but Jonah's strength seemed inhuman in the quiet darkness of the church. Up they climbed, step by step, Pike's protests growing more desperate with each turn of the spiral stairs. At the top, the great bronze bell hung silent, its rope dangling. Please, Pike begged, all authority gone from his voice. I am a man of God. So am I, Jonah replied, and my God demands justice. He bound Pike with the bell rope, tying it around the Reverend's chest and neck, then looping it over the wooden beam that held the bell. When this bell rings, Jonah said, everyone will know what you are. Pike's eyes widened in terror. You can't. Jonah pulled the rope. The bell swung, its deep tone vibrating through the tower, and Pike rose with it, his feet leaving the floor as the bell reached the top of its arc. Jonah tied off the rope and stepped back. Pike dangled, gasping, his face turning red as the rope tightened with each swing of the bell. That's for Ruth, Jonah said, and walked back down the stairs. He pulled the bell rope again from below, sending another deep toll across the sleeping town. And again, and again. All night long, he pulled the rope at irregular intervals, each toll announcing Pike's judgment to the town that had respected him. Dawn broke with the bell still ringing. People gathered in the square, pointing up at the tower in confusion. No one had yet ventured inside to find the source of the unseasonal tolling. Isaiah waited at the edge of town, his face grim as Jonah approached. It's done, Jonah said. And you? Isaiah asked. What's left of you, Jonah? Jonah didn't answer. Together they slipped away into the swamp fog that curled around the cypress trees like ghostly fingers. Behind them, the bell tolled one final time, its echo merging with the morning sounds of the bayou, the croak of frogs, the whisper of reeds, the soft splash of fish breaking the water's surface. 3 down, 1 to go. The sugar mill stood abandoned on the edge of the bayou, its crumbling brick walls covered with creeping vines. Once, it had processed thousands of pounds of cane, the sweat and blood of enslaved people feeding its hungry machinery. Now, it was silent, home only to rats and spiders and memories. Jonah sat on a rusted gear, a small fire burning in what had once been the mill's central processing floor. Rain pattered on the partial roof above, leaking through in steady drips that echoed through the cavernous space. 2 nights had passed since they fled St. Martinville. The news of Reverend Pike's death had spread quickly. Another mysterious killing, another powerful man found dead. Isaiah paced near the doorway, keeping watch. The distance between them had grown wider with each death. Jonah barely noticed. His mind was elsewhere, filled with visions of Ruth. Ruth smiling, Ruth weeping, Ruth begging him to leave her at Renard's mansion. He pulled the crumpled list from his pocket, studying it in the firelight. 3 names were crossed out: Crenshaw, Carter, Pike. Only one remained: Charles Renard. "Dawn comes early," Isaiah said from the doorway. "We should rest while we can." Jonah nodded but didn't move. "One more," he whispered. "Just one more." Isaiah's shoulders tensed. "And then what? What happens after your last kill?" "I find Ruth," Jonah said simply. "And if she doesn't want to be found?" The question hung in the air between them. Jonah had no answer. "I need to check the perimeter again," Isaiah muttered, disappearing into the darkness. Alone, Jonah rose and began to explore the mill. The fire cast long, dancing shadows across the rusted machinery. This had been someone's hell once. The heat of the boilers, the endless labor, the overseer's whips. He could almost hear the ghosts. In what had been an office, Jonah found a small desk with drawers still intact. He pulled them open, finding only rat droppings and moldy papers. But in the bottom drawer, something caught his eye. A leather-bound ledger, its cover cracked but still readable. He carried it back to the fire and opened it carefully. The pages contained lists of names, dates, and prices, transaction records from the mill's final years. He flipped through idly, not expecting to find anything of value. Then he stopped, his breath catching in his throat. On the final page was a signature he recognized, the same flowing script he had seen on Ruth's sale paper, the same signature on the ledger at Renard's house. Isaiah Bell. Jonah stared at the name, his mind refusing to make sense of it. This couldn't be right. The signature must belong to someone else. Another Isaiah Bell. But as he studied it, comparing it to his memory of Ruth's papers, doubt crept in. The loop of the I, the sharp angle of the B, they were identical. Isaiah returned, shaking rain from his coat. "All clear outside. We should be safe until—" He stopped when he saw what Jonah held. "What is this?" Jonah asked, his voice dangerously soft. Isaiah's eyes darted from the ledger to Jonah's face. "An old record book. Nothing important. Your name is in it." Jonah turned the book so Isaiah could see. The same signature that was on Ruth's papers at Renard's house. Something shifted in Isaiah's expression. Fear, perhaps, or resignation. "Tell me it's not true," Jonah said. Isaiah stepped back, putting distance between them. "I can explain." "You were one of them," Jonah whispered. "One of the bidders." "No, not like that." Isaiah raised his hands. "I sign papers all the time. It's how I move people north. I create false ownership documents, transfer receipts. It's how I've helped hundreds escape. You bid on my wife." Each word fell like a stone. "To save her. To get her papers in my name so I could transfer her north when the time was right. You lied to me." Jonah stood slowly, the ledger falling from his hands. "I couldn't tell you everything," Isaiah insisted. "The fewer people who know my methods, the safer everyone stays." "You used me," Jonah continued, advancing. "My killings were your cover." Isaiah backed toward the door. "Yes, and they worked. While everyone was looking for a killer, I moved 20 people north last month alone." "Where is she?" Jonah demanded. "Where did you send Ruth?" "Somewhere safe," Isaiah said. "Somewhere Renard can't touch her." "Tell me." "So you can what? Drag her back?" "She chose this path, Jonah. She asked me to help her escape. To help you both escape." The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. Jonah lunged forward, grabbing Isaiah by the throat and slamming him against the brick wall. "You took her from me," Jonah growled. "I saved her," Isaiah choked out, struggling against Jonah's grip. "The same way I've been trying to save you." Jonah tightened his hold. "I trusted you." "Then trust me now," Isaiah gasped. Ruth is carrying your child. She's safe in a house for women like her. Women escaping north with children. The words hit Jonah like a physical blow. He loosened his grip slightly. My child! Isaiah seized the moment, bringing his knee up hard into Jonah's stomach. Jonah doubled over, and Isaiah broke free, stumbling backward toward the mill's massive grinding wheel. She made me promise not to tell you, Isaiah said, catching his breath. She knew you'd follow, and that would put you both in danger. Jonah straightened, rage flooding back. More lies. It's the truth. Why do you think Renard kept her in his house instead of the fields? He was protecting his investment. A pregnant woman brings double the price. Jonah charged forward. Isaiah ducked, sliding between two massive gears and into the shadows beyond. Jonah followed, blind with fury, crashing through cobwebs and rust. Their fight echoed through the abandoned mill. The crash of bodies against metal, grunts of pain, the skittering of rats fleeing the commotion. Jonah caught glimpses of Isaiah in the darkness, always just out of reach. She loved you too much to watch you die, Isaiah called out from somewhere in the machinery. She knew what would happen if you tried to save her. Stop talking, Jonah roared, swinging at a shadow. A crash, then silence. Jonah waited, listening for movement. I won't let you destroy what she sacrificed to build. Isaiah's voice came from outside now, distant. Find me when you're ready to save her instead of avenge her. Footsteps receded into the rain. By the time Jonah found his way out of the maze of machinery, Isaiah was gone, swallowed by the night and the storm. Bleeding from a cut above his eye, Jonah returned to the dying fire. The ledger still lay open, Isaiah's signature mocking him. He picked it up, tears mingling with the blood on his face. A child. His child. Could it be true? Jonah grabbed a torch from the fire and held it to the ledger's pages. They caught quickly, curling and blackening. If her freedom was bought with lies, he whispered as the flames consumed the book, then truth will burn with it. Outside, the rain fell harder, drumming on the mill's roof like 1,000 urgent fingertips. Night fell over the parish square, the same place where Ruth had been torn from Jonah's life. The memory of that day burned in his mind as he walked through the shadows, his face hidden beneath a worn slouch hat. 3 days had passed since Isaiah's betrayal at the sugar mill. 3 days of walking, hiding, planning. The auction block stood like a stage for evil under the glow of swinging lanterns. White men in fine coats gathered, their faces eager in the golden light. Behind them, wooden pens held huddled figures, men, women, and children waiting to be sold. Their eyes reflected the lamplight like those of trapped animals. Jonah circled the square, staying to the darkness between buildings. The slave trader's voice carried across the night air, promising fine stock and excellent temperament. Laughter followed, along with the clink of glasses. They were drinking, celebrating before the bidding began. Gentlemen, we begin tonight with a prime field hand, just 20 years of age. A young man was pushed onto the block, his wrists bound with rope. The bidding started immediately, numbers flying through the air like birds of prey. Beneath Jonah's coat, 2 large jugs hung from a leather strap. He had filled them at a kerosene store earlier that day, claiming he needed lamp oil for a plantation house. The shopkeeper hadn't looked twice at him. Just another slave on an errand. He moved closer, keeping to the edge of the square where the shadows were thickest. The first auction ended. Another person was brought forward. A woman this time, her face streaked with tears as the trader grabbed her arm and turned her for the crowd to see. Not a mark on her. Trained for housework and childcare. Jonah slipped behind the auction stage. No one noticed him. They never did. To them, he was invisible until needed, like a tool left on a shelf. He uncorked the first jug and began to pour, the kerosene soaking into the wooden platform and dripping onto the dry earth beneath. The smell was sharp, but went unnoticed amid the tobacco smoke and whiskey. He moved to the pens next, pouring the oil along the outer walls and between the slats. Inside, an old man saw him, and their eyes met briefly. The man gave an almost imperceptible nod. Jonah worked quickly, emptying both jugs. The oil glistened on the wood in the lamplight like black water. He pulled a flint striker from his pocket, the kind used for lighting pipes and lanterns. Isaiah had given it to him weeks ago. Isaiah. The thought of him brought a fresh wave of anger. Had everything been a lie? Was Ruth truly carrying his child? Was she safe or in greater danger? The auctioneer's voice rose. "Next lot! A family of 4. Can be sold together or separate as you wish." Jonah had heard enough. He struck the flint against steel, once, twice. On the third try, a spark caught the oil-soaked ground beside the auction stage. The fire spread faster than he expected. Flames raced along the trail of oil, climbing the platform legs and leaping to the pens. Screams erupted, first from those being sold, then from the buyers as they realized what was happening. Jonah backed away, watching as panic overtook the square. Men in fine suits trampled each other trying to escape. The slave trader dropped his gavel and fled, shoving others aside. Behind him, the auction block became an inferno, flames reaching for the night sky. The wooden pens caught quickly, but something Jonah hadn't expected happened. Those inside began breaking through the weakened walls, helping each other escape. They scattered into the darkness, seizing their chance at freedom amid the chaos. Heat blasted Jonah's face as he watched. The entire square was ablaze now, orange light turning night to hellish day. Church bells began to ring in alarm. Men shouted for water, for help, for God. "Jonah!" The voice came from behind him. Isaiah stood there, coughing, his face streaked with soot. "What are you doing here?" Jonah demanded, hand moving to the knife at his belt. "Looking for you," Isaiah gasped. "You need to stop this. It's gone too far." "It hasn't gone far enough." Jonah turned back to watch the fire consume everything: the stage, the pens, the buildings where men had counted their profits from selling human beings. "Ruth is alive," Isaiah grabbed his arm. "She's at St. Mary's Convent in St. Mary Parish. The sisters there help women escape north." "More lies?" Jonah pulled away. "I swear it on my life. She's waiting for you. Her and your child." Jonah hesitated, the knife halfway from its sheath. Could it be true? Had all this blood been for nothing? Around them, the fire roared higher. Buildings on either side of the square began to catch, their wooden frames offering new fuel. In the distance, drums sounded, soldiers responding to the emergency. "You have to come with me now," Isaiah pleaded, "before it's too late." Jonah looked back at the inferno. This was what he had wanted: to destroy the place where they had taken Ruth from him, to burn the system that had stolen their lives. He couldn't stop now. "I'm finishing what I started," he said. Isaiah backed away, understanding in his eyes. Then God help us both. Gunshots rang out as soldiers entered the square. Isaiah turned and vanished into an alley, just as bullets splintered the wall where he had stood. Jonah moved in the opposite direction, keeping to the shadows. Fire illuminated everything now, making hiding difficult. He ran down a narrow street, hearing shouts behind him. "There he is! The one who started it!" More shots. Jonah ducked into a side passage, climbing a rain barrel to reach a low roof. From there, he made his way to higher ground, scrambling over slate tiles and chimney pots. When he finally stopped, he had reached a small hill overlooking the town. Below him, the parish square burned like a beacon in the night. The fire had spread to surrounding buildings, flames leaping from roof to roof. It was beautiful and terrible at once. "Then I'll meet her in the ashes," he murmured, turning away from the destruction. St. Mary Parish lay to the east. If Isaiah spoke true, Ruth waited there, with his child. If he lied, then Jonah would add one more name to his blood oath. Either way, His path was set. He looked one last time at the burning town, then turned and walked into the darkness, the glow of the fire fading behind him with each step. Morning light spilled through the cypress trees, painting gold patterns on the misty ground. Jonah paused at the edge of the clearing, his body aching from weeks of hard travel. Before him stood St. Mary's Convent, a simple wooden building with a small bell tower and a garden surrounded by a low fence. The windows glowed with early light. He approached slowly, limping slightly from a wound in his leg. The parish fire had left its mark on him, a burn across his forearm, clothes still smelling of smoke. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the weight in his chest. Was Ruth truly here? Or had Isaiah's final words been one more deception? At the gate, a black woman in a simple gray dress looked up from tending herbs. Her eyes widened at the sight of him. A tall man, face weathered beyond his years, clothes tattered from the journey. "Who seeks entrance here?" she asked, hand resting on the gate latch. "I'm looking for my wife," Jonah said, his voice rough from disuse. "Ruth." The woman studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Wait here." She disappeared inside the main building, returning moments later with an older woman whose face showed lines of both hardship and kindness. "I am Sister Josephine," the older woman said. "You must be Jonah." His heart skipped. "She's here?" "She is." Sister Josephine opened the gate. "She said you might come someday." They led him through a vegetable garden where women worked the soil, some glancing up as he passed. Inside, the convent was simple but clean, with whitewashed walls and wooden floors worn smooth by countless footsteps. "In there," Sister Josephine said, gesturing to a small room off the main hall. Jonah paused at the doorway, suddenly afraid. What if she hated what he had become? The room was small, with a narrow bed and a chair beside it. Sitting there was Ruth, her face thinner than he remembered, but her eyes still bright. Her belly was round beneath her dress, their child growing inside her. Months had passed since the auction. The cane season had turned from planting to harvest. "Jonah?" she whispered, as if seeing a ghost. He fell to his knees beside her, his hands hovering near but not touching her, afraid she might disappear. "Ruth, my Ruth." She reached for him, fingers tracing the new scars on his face, the burns on his arm. "What did they do to you?" "Not what they did," he said, voice breaking. "What I did." Their reunion trembled between love and horror, as words poured from him. Everything that had happened since the day she was sold. The bargain with Isaiah, the hunt for each bidder, the parish square engulfed in flames. With each confession, her face grew more troubled. "Isaiah brought me here," she said when he finished. "He forged papers saying I was free, then helped me reach the sisters. They've protected me. And our child." "He told the truth," Jonah whispered, shame washing over him. "I didn't believe him." "He's a complicated man," Ruth said. "But he risked everything to save as many as he could, including us." Jonah bowed his head. "I've killed men, Ruth. Not just the bidders. The fire, I don't know how many died." Ruth's tears fell freely now. "You've given them reason to remember us, but not to forgive." She took his hands in hers. "Was this the freedom I sacrificed for? That you would become what they feared most?" "I became what they deserved," Jonah said, though the words rang hollow even to himself. Ruth shook her head. "No, you became what they made. There's a difference." Outside, the convent bell began to ring. Not the gentle toll for prayer, but a frantic warning. Sister Josephine appeared at the door, face tight with fear. "Soldiers," she said, "coming up the road." "Someone must have followed you." Ruth gripped Jonah's hands tighter. "Hide him," she told Sister Josephine. "Please." "There's a cellar beneath the kitchen," the sister said, motioning urgently. But Jonah stood, straightening his back. "No, I won't bring danger to this place, to you and our child." "Jonah, please," Ruth begged. "Don't let them take you." The sound of horses grew louder. Through the window, Jonah saw them approach. A dozen men in uniform, led by a figure he recognized immediately, Caleb Ward, his former master, now an officer in the militia. "It ends here," Jonah said, touching Ruth's face one last time. "But you and our child will be safe. That's what matters now." Ruth clung to him, sobbing. "They'll hang you. Then I'll die a free man," he said. "Not property." He kissed her forehead, then her lips, feeling her tears mix with his own. Then he gently released her hands and walked outside to meet his fate. The yard fell silent as Jonah emerged from the convent. The soldiers leveled their rifles at him. Caleb Ward sat tall on his horse, eyes cold with triumph. "The runaway incendiary," Ward announced. "Murderer of good Christian men." "I am Jonah," he said simply, standing straight despite his wounds. "I surrender freely on one condition. The women here are innocent and must not be harmed." Ward's mouth twisted. "You're in no position to make demands, boy." "I am the one you want," Jonah said. "Take me, and I'll confess to everything. Leave them in peace." A moment of silence stretched between them. Finally, Ward nodded. "Bind him!" Two soldiers dismounted and approached cautiously, as if Jonah were a wild animal. He offered no resistance as they tied his hands. As they led him to a waiting wagon, Ruth appeared in the doorway, supported by Sister Josephine. Her face was wet with tears, but held a strength that made Jonah's heart swell with pride. "Remember," she called to him, "you are more than what they made you." Jonah held her gaze until the wagon lurched forward, carrying him away from the only love he had ever known. His last glimpse was of her standing in the morning light, hands cradling their unborn child. I hope you found that story powerful. Leave a like on the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. I have handpicked 2 stories for you that are even more powerful. Have a great day!